Greetings. This is a review of the recently released Photo Archive Gallery 1977 tour, Part 3, Vermont through Seattle. And Sanchi was at Sant Bani Ashram for the marvelous month of May. And on May 31st, he left Sant Bani Ashram and drove up to Kripal Ashram, about 2 hours north, located in the beautiful Green Mountains. It's the oldest ashram in the Western world devoted to Shabda Yoga, founded by Master Kripal in 1961. So this is a picture of Sanchi arriving. Very rustic and beautiful location. Everything artistically designed, such as the bridge. He's walking to the main ashram building. Sanchi and his party were housed in the only building on the ashram property, an old farmhouse, very beautifully remodeled by Nina. And the others were housed on the adjoining property of Chris and Ann Lynn, either in their tents or campers. Satsang was held nightly when the weather was good in a lovely natural amphitheater behind the Lynn's house. It's a picture of the satsang. And darshan and interviews were given daily in the master's room at the ashram. Now, the first full day of the tour, it actually rained, steady downpour of rain, so there wasn't any place that would hold everybody. So Master held satsang 3 times that day, 3 full-length satsangs, an hour each, one after another, for 1/3 of the Sangha each day, so everybody could attend. Children's satsang, which was held in the old farmhouse, was also held inside that day. The Russell recounts the satsangs here were extremely powerful and beautiful. And one of them he delivered on June 4th. It's never been published, but it's available on audio. Was a detailed talk Master gave on a hymn of Kabir, and focused totally on Simran. And Nina was known for efforts to maintain Simran. And so Sanchi, while he was there, gave a detailed talk on the subject. Master always liked to go out for walks, and here you can see him walking up the field towards the Lynn's house and where the langar was. And then he'd often walk back, and this is along where the tents and campers were, along the side of the field. One day he encountered this satsangi who shared some pictures with him. These included photos from the gentleman's most recent trip to Rajasthan in March 1977. He'd been part of that group, and he shared other photos with Master as well. And Master continued on. You can see how excited and happy people were to be walking with him. On Monday, June 6th, there were 18 people initiated in a candlelight session. And the next day, Sanchi drove down to Boston. He stayed at Millie Prendergast's house for 3 nights. 2 nights he had satsang under a canopy. And on the Friday, the farewell darshan was also held under the canopy. And here, Master's walking down to the farewell darshan. Here he is. It's raining out that day, so they had the tent up, plastic canopy. There's dear Jack White there in the corner, who was satsanging at Boston at the time. Of course, Papu. Jean Dittmer, another, handing out prasad. Beautiful picture of Sanchi showering grace. And then off to the airport. Russell writes, "This was the first of many poignant farewell airport scenes, as it seemed though every satsang in New England was there to say goodbye, even though they knew he'd be coming back in 2 months. It was incredibly difficult to let him go. And in those days, there was no airport security. Everyone was allowed to the airport. And so this kind of scene was something unique to 1977. They got so big they couldn't continue in future tours." There's Millie in the background. He's sort of motioning to her to come sit down. And she does. Get very excited as he got up to walk to depart, saying goodbye to everybody. And then off to Seattle. In Seattle, Helen Perkins, Russell's sister, turned her house over to Sanchi. And that evening, he held satsang at the home of Jeannie and Luis Rodriguez. Before the satsang, I think this is where he giving satsang, and he met with all the Seattle satsangis as a group. He was very pleased with the love and devotion of the Seattle Sangat, and told Russell specifically that another day should be allotted for them on the way back, which by his grace was done. It's him giving satsang that day. He also took a side trip out walking in the neighborhood. Some child get to see him. Russell wrote, "The following morning, we arrived at the airport in plenty of time, but our plane was 2 hours late. Since the little trailer where we were sitting in the small plane section of the airport was crammed to overflowing, there were only 15 to 20 satsangis there, but they filled up the little room. Sanchi held an unscheduled satsang for most of the 2 hours, a never to be forgotten time for those of us present. He spoke in Punjabi for more than half an hour with Yagya Sharma, and I think that's Yagya Sharma. You can see just his head down there at the bottom, a longtime initiate of Master Kripal Singh. And then at the end, told Papu to translate it all for everyone else in one of the more impressive demonstrations of his translator's ability. Papu talked without faltering for more than half an hour, translating what Sanchi had said, even though he had not even known ahead of time he was supposed to translate it. Most of the stories were about Mastanaji, the god-intoxicated contemporary of Master Kripal, for whom Sanchi knew and had much love and respect for. Well, finally the plane came, and this led to an incident called difficulties at the border. Norma Fraser came with the plane. They took off for a beautiful flight to Victoria Airport, where they stopped to pass through immigrations. So Canada had often difficult for Indians to enter, and so great pains had been taken to ensure our papers were all in order. The polite young man behind the counter checked our papers carefully, said everything looked fine, but being new, he wanted to check with his boss. He went out, located his boss, and half an hour later, the boss came in, an elderly, white-haired, very tough man with steely eyes that glinted all around. He was puffing on a cigarette continuously. He and the pilot disappeared into his office. When they came out a long time later, it was explained that the airline failed to post a required bond. After a long deliberation, the immigrations man agreed to let us in if $1,000 bond was posted for each of the 3 Indians. But where to get the money? $3,000, which was a very large sum in those days, on a Saturday afternoon. And this was pre-ATM days. So this is Sanchi and Russell sitting in the little waiting room at the Victoria Airport while this back and forth over letting the Indians into Canada was going on. The pilot had several conversations with his boss. At one point, he was told to take them all back to Seattle. But despite all that was happening, despite our force to wait all this time in the in the hall of the airport on little hard chairs with no food or convenience, despite the really depressing prospect of being sent back to Seattle. Sanchi never, for 1 second, allowed us to dwell on any of that. He was bubbling over with good humor throughout. He told us funny stories and made jokes out of everything negative that was happening. But he was also very loving and compassionate of understanding of how we felt. He told Norma on many occasions that she had made excellent arrangements. She was not at fault in any way, and this was all Master's will. It could not be helped. When we told him we might have to go back to Seattle, he shook his head. No, we'll be delayed, that's all. In the meantime, there are about 65 satsangis waiting at Nanaimo Airport. Somehow they banded together and squeezed out $319 cash from among them. And the lady at the airport desk even contributed a couple $100. So another plane came carrying the satsangi and the airline boss and the money. And Aaron Stevens had to take personal responsibility for each of the Indians, and each of them had to personally promise the tough immigrations officer man that he would be good. Looking through the door while Sanchi was in there, watching the man blow smoke in his face, this is Russell writing, hearing the man refer to him as this fellow, watching Sanchi's totally patient humility, I understood, perhaps more than ever before, what exactly is involved when the word becomes flesh, when the emperor of such Khan becomes a beggar for our sake. Yet not once, then or later, did Sanchi indicate the slightest unhappiness or displeasure with anything. He reiterated that it was Master's will, and he was obviously happy and content with it. This is a movie about the stay of Sanchi in Nanaimo at the Yellow Point Lodge.
During Sanchi's 1977 World Tour, one of the most memorable of his stops was in Nanaimo on Vancouver Island. The local group leader, Norma Fraser, arranged for the program to be conducted at Yellow Point Lodge in a nearby campground. All the lodge facilities were rented for this event, and it was filled to capacity. This was such a special time. Each day the Master would meet with small groups made up of disciples and sincere seekers. Most of the program was conducted outdoors. It was such a picturesque setting seeing him sitting under the canopy of a large tree, giving impromptu talks, taking questions. There would be 15 or 20 people at a time. The atmosphere was so incredibly charged.
Meditation in this tuck in this noise of the world. And mind will always bring the worldly thoughts within us. But when we will give the beating to our mind with the weapon of Simran, only then our mind can be controlled, and only then we will be able to do that. So this struggle will always go, and you have to do it.
He would talk of the inner path, a path filled with the light of God and the majesty of the sound current, explaining so simply, so lovingly, that this is something that each one of us can do.
Truly speaking, we have to appreciate all the moments which we get. Whatever time we can put, that is good for us. मैं चाहूँगी कि आप थोड़ा वक्त सच्चाई के बारे में, सच बोलने के बारे में कुछ कहो। ये सच्चा जीवन का।
Starting a couple years after Sanchi's visit, yearly weekend retreats began being held at Yellow Point. Each year on a weekend in late September, satsangis take over the whole lodge from Friday through Sunday and fill it. The satsang is held in the same hall where the initiation was held in 1977. Very, very charged up place.
He was ill when he got there, and he recovered while he was there. And the weather, he told us the weather was a gift from Master Kirpal, and I think he really did like being there. It was not his normal setting, you know, a master from the desert coming to the ocean. And he walked along the ocean with Papu a lot. It's nice. I think he had the time to recover there in a setting that was conducive to him starting to feel better. Sanchi said to Norma in English that he said, "I am so happy here." And it was like happy, you know.
In one of my interviews in India, I remember going up to his room in Rajasthan, and I sat down and Sanchi said, "I need to talk to you about Yellow Point." And he said that dear ones talk to me about their experiences at Yellow Point, and they have very good experiences there. And he wanted it to continue. Actually, on the way back to Vancouver for the next part of the program, when they were in the airplane flying over, Sanchi asked where Yellow Point Lodge was from the air, and the pilot went over the lodge and dipped the wings, and when he did that, Sanchi blessed it from the air.
This is a photograph of Sanchi in a small group session. Only about the 8 satsangis from Nanaimo and a couple other people of Vancouver did all the work in setting it up. That's Norma Fraser in a white sweater on Master's, seated next to Master on Master's lap, the group leader. This is a classic picture of Sanchi from Nanaimo. And after several days there, at the morning darshan, Sanchi asked Russell to say a few words, and he spoke what was in everybody's heart. This is a very small satsang, and they have done a very big thing. Everyone who benefited from that week, and there were many, owed Nanaimo satsang a great debt. Sanchi then spent a week at the Sri Kirpal Ashram in Surrey, a suburb of Vancouver, and this is again, a short movie with some scenes from that visit.
The Vancouver area has a history of strong interest in the path of the Masters. Dr. and Mrs. Brock, the first Westerners initiated into Sant, lived in nearby Port Angeles, Washington. In 1963, in Vancouver, crowds of over 1,000 came to visit Master Kirpal Singh. And it was there in 1972, in Vancouver, that he held by far his largest initiation of the tour, 221 persons. On that tour, he also visited a site in Surrey, a suburb of Vancouver, that was being offered as a future ashram. He held a brief satsang there. At the end, he then tossed out apples as prasad to all present. In 1977, Sant came to this same site and held satsang. He stayed adjacent to the ashram in the home of the local group leader. Personal interviews and group darshans were held there. Sant would walk down to the ashram property for various events, such as group darshans and children's darshan. He would conduct satsang every evening in a tent located on the ashram grounds. Let me read my account in Stumbling Toward God, the Years with AJAIB, of the evening of Friday, June 24th, 1977, when he gave the talk which was published as, "Oh Man, Why Are You Afraid?" During this exceptionally powerful satsang, while it was Sant AJAIB Singh Ji Maharaj, whose body had climbed up on the dais and whose voice was heard throughout, the visible form that was being seen was that of Sant Kirpal Singh Ji Maharaj. At one point in satsang, Sant Ji spoke the following words. Hazur Kirpal used to say, when one saint comes, he makes his disciple also of the same state, same position as he is. He used to say, when one is having the disease of itching, he gives that disease to those who come in his company. The saint who cannot make another saint, it is useless to worship him. This is a very bad thing that we say that there is no successor of Master after he left the body. I didn't want to say this thing, but I am compelled to. If we say that there is no successor, we are saying that our Master was not perfect and that he couldn't do anything. Because you see how Master Sawan Singh showered grace on Master Kirpal Singh and how he also made Mastanaji of Baluchistan. Our Hazur was also the owner of the same status, the same position, and those who did the meditation according to his instructions and obeyed his commandments, he made them also as his own form. And as Santi said these words, the level on which Master Kirpal was manifesting was increased to an almost unbearable point. Even more vivid and clear than ever before, he was surrounded by bright and serenely beautiful light. And then there sat the form of Master Kirpal Singh in full radiance. Later that day, when the initiates were discussing the satsang, it became clear that many present had indeed seen exactly the same thing. Blessed be Master Kirpal Singh Ji, who did not leave us alone on the physical plane and gave us his own self in another form. Thank God for the reality of the path.
This is Sanchi giving darshan in Surrey. Very beautiful forested area. This picture brings a personal story back to my mind. I had seen Sanchi a couple of times in Sant Bani Ashram in May, but I was in school, so couldn't attend the whole session. When school was over, I flew out to Vancouver and went up to the ashram. And right early on, I was signed up to go to a group darshan, and went up there, and the room, they all put us in a back room. They said, wait in here and we'll call you when the time comes to go in and see Sanchi, go sit in here and meditate. So I sat there and meditated for a while. The room was full of people. After a while, I opened my eyes and everybody, or almost everybody, was gone. The room was empty, but no one had made an announcement that I had heard anyway about moving. So I got up and went over to where the darshan was going to be, and Sanchi was not there yet, but the room was packed. It wasn't a huge room, but it was a big room, and I was way at the back because everybody else had already gone in and sat there. And then I said, "Oh, okay, I'm at the back. That's fine." Then someone got up and said, "Announcement. Well, we're actually going to have the darshan in the next room over. So everybody, please leave from the rear and go to that other room, and Sanchi will be coming soon." So sitting in the back, the last shall be first. I ended up being the first into the new room and got to sit right up close to where Sanchi was. Sanchi came in and had a very beautiful group session. And then Russell, who was sitting on Sanchi's right, as in this picture, he saw me and he said, he introduced me to Sanchi, but I never talked to or met personally. And Russell said, "This is Michael Mayo Smith. He does seva at Sant Bani Ashram," which I thought was a very generous way of introducing me. And Sanchi was also very gracious and thanked me for doing the seva there. And actually, I had not been doing seva recently, but in 1976, when Sanchi was going to come to India, I and a few others spent the summer at Sant Bani Ashram working to prepare for that visit, which never happened. While Sanchi was there, at the end of the day, he also blessed the new well. And Russell wrote about this. On the last day of our stay in Vancouver, many satsangis spoke to me of the tremendous revival of spirituality Sanchi had brought there. People who had been off the path for years were back on. People whose practice had been lukewarm were once again filled with the desire to find God. People who hadn't been to satsang in years attended every meeting. It was evident to me that his coming had brought peace, joy, and a renewed sense of purpose to what is surely one of the major spiritual centers of the New Age. Then Sanchi went back to Seattle, as he said he wanted to do, and he spent one night there, and before flying to San Francisco. Everything went smoothly. Satsang was held that afternoon at the home of Jean and Lorraine Fraser. Here is a picture of Sanchi and Russell at that house, and then Sanchi giving satsang that day. Then he was off flying to San Francisco, and that ends this gallery. And next month we'll have more about the visit to Chamaz, Colorado, and Houston, Texas. Thank you.